Cool. Hello, everyone. For those of you who were in the previous talk, I went over some basic Google News Lab stuff. You can go to g.co/newslab to kind of learn what I talked about. This presentation is a lot more geared toward maps and geo-based stuff, so how to make maps using Google tools. And I'm going to go over this next part real quick about who I am. I'm that guy. I've worked in a bunch of places. I currently do have a job. I'm like a web developer person who started out as a newspaper reporter. So I'm like a programmer who used to have to write about dead bodies. So I kind of have been all over. I also wrote a book. It's called Build It for Beginners. People said nice things. Buy 30 copies. It's the law. This is the rest of the other SPJ trainers. So I work through SPJ, the Society of Professional Journalists. They work through Google News Lab to train tools that Google has made and Google News Lab has made to try to help journalists do a better job. So we're just going to jump right in because I have a million slides and I only have 40 minutes. So there's a lot of different kinds of tools that Google has built for mapping and geographic-based stuff. And again, I'm going to apologize for how fast that I talk. This is normally like part of a 2-hour talk and I get 40 minutes. So, and again, I'll keep saying g.co/newslab has all of this and more in that narrator speaks slowly. So they built a bunch of these different tools. Some of them are good for storytelling, some of them are good for information gathering. One of the big ones is custom web maps. So I remember a decade ago when I wanted to make a map using Google Maps, it was the worst. You had to click 3 million times, you had to write some code, and if Google changed anything, it was all broken and it was bad. Now, they've made it easy. And you just go to maps.google.com, and they actually have, so this is like an embeddable map. What you can do is, on the top left, so if you type in anything, if you typed in Columbia College Chicago, you would kind of zoom in on Columbia College Chicago. If you clicked, zoom in or zoom out, whatever that view was, on the top left, there's this little hamburger menu, and then it just says share or embed map. It's a super simple way to get this thing that pops up that allows you to embed a map on a page. Can someone like turn off one of those lights over there that might make this a little bit. How's that? Is that a lot easier?
Yeah.
Great. Cool. Sorry, whoever's watching at home. Or maybe you can see it better. So what this allows you to do is easily make a little map like this. This used to be hard. It was dumb. Even have embeddable maps underwater, because why not? They're Google. This is an example of something that was used in Google My Maps. So if you go to google.com/mymaps, this is a way of adding more interactive stuff to a map. So adding, like, this was the Malaysian Airlines MH17 flight. This was what its flight pattern was supposed to be, and like that's where it got shot. And like it landed somewhere else over here, or excuse me, that's not where it was shot. It was shot over there. And this has all these different photos that you can click on. It has information. It's an easy way, again. It's click, click, type, type, click, click. Whereas previously it was write a bunch of code. Hope it worked. Write a bunch of code. Forsake God. Hope it works. That sort of stuff. And then it's super simple to embed after you've made it as well, which is also really great. A thing I always like to say is if you're using something like Google My Maps and you're working at a news organization, have an official your news organization Google account. So in case you leave or a subordinate leaves and they built this stuff, it can stay with that news organization. Because it's kind of a pain to share this, replace stuff. So I would just suggest if you're building this sort of stuff for your news org, have like the main account that people sign into. So it just kind of saves some headaches. Here's another example of something that Google, using Google My Maps, Advice did. This is based off the popular podcast Serial. These are all of these points of interest relating to that story. Again, click, type, save, copy, paste on a website. Much easier than it used to be. You can also do stuff like you can draw or import boundary lines. So this is an example from, is this La Nacion? Yes, this was an emergency map for some flooding and wildfires that they had. And as you can see, it kind of has like points of interest. So like shelters, places to put your, have your vehicles to go that won't work. This is where the wildfire area is supposed to be. So again, give you a little bit more of a visual of what happens. And you can draw these lines, or if you have these specific files that are called shape files or KLS files, you can import them. Usually you get that from like a governmental organization or somebody who's drawn that map.
Did you add a legend to it so people know those logos?
Yep, and so you would do that. So like if you looked at like this one, you got so like on the left, you see there's a legend. So you can do that. Just in this example, there is not one. This one also, this was I think the CBC, this is a mudslide that happened in Washington State. And again, you kind of see like before and after the slide area, and then it also shows you like where Red Cross shelter is, a bunch of other stuff to, again, give you context and give you that sort of information. This was a really fun one that I liked. The BBC News, they had a really big heat wave in England, and what they did was they asked people to use a certain hashtag to share thoughts and photos relating to the heat wave. And then they were able to search through those hashtags, find really interesting ones, and then they were able to make a map of where these interesting things occurred. So like in that example up there, it's a storm over Woolston, or I'm sure that's pronounced crazy because it's another country, by this person. And so they have examples of all this stuff. So it's a great way, great way to crowdsource, get fun information, and people like this stuff. It's the reason why a lot of local TV has like the photo of the day from our viewers. This is the equivalent of that, but writ large with social media. It's pretty nifty. This was something that CAL FIRE used. So again, it's not just news organizations. Anyone can use this. So in this example, there's my water. CAL FIRE wanted to be able to make a map that showed people where a lot of these fires were occurring. This was like a couple fire seasons ago. This is not the current one. But again, CAL FIRE does not have the resources to build a fancy geographical information systems and do this. So they can just use Google Maps. And anyone can embed this. So if you were a news organization and a place that's made something like this, you can embed it and use their official maps. Who here has ever used Google Drive? It's like where you store docs and stuff like that. That's an easy way to get to your Google My Maps. So you just click on, you go to drive.google.com, click New, click More, and then Google My Maps. And it'll pop up a new map, and you can start creating one right there. It's pretty nifty. If you have an Android phone, you have a simple app that allows you to make it on your phone. If you have an iOS phone, they don't have one. I have no clue if they will or when they would make one, because Google makes Android, and they have no reason to be super nice to Apple. But that's my personal belief, people watching at home. But yeah, they have a very simple, easy way to be able to update and modify it if you have an Android device. Otherwise, you can just use your computer. I've said this a million times, g.co/newslab, they have a really cool tutorial that'll walk you through building a map. And I really think these tutorials are great. What my talk is, here's all of this stuff, and I throw it at you real quick. The News Lab, their actual site, walks you through step by step. Click here, do this, do this. They have videos, it's really nice. And what's great about this is when you go through these tutorials, it'll open up your brain to different storytelling possibilities. So when something happens in your area, your brain might go, oh, we can make a map. Because I remember I did it this one time, and it's going to take me 5 minutes because I've already done the work. So that's what's really cool about going through these. There's also something called Google Fusion Tables. It's a really nifty, powerful tool. A lot of data journalists use it. What it allows you to do is if you had a spreadsheet that had a lot of like addresses or maybe latitudes and longitudes, you can quickly map them and the information related to them onto a map. Like if you had a map of like shootings, like in the city of Chicago, you could use something like this to be able to quickly map them. An example was, this is something that the Guardian did with some data from WikiLeaks about people who were deaths and injuries in Iraq. Each one of these, you can click, and it'll give you a bunch of information about what occurred there, who died, who was hurt. It is very, if you wanted to plot all of these individually in like one of those Google My Maps, it would take forever. Instead, you can just import a spreadsheet and all the machines do all the work for you. This This is machines. That's what machines do.
Sometimes when we put points on a map, we want it to be identifiable as a chronology. Is there a way to identify which dot you could be looking at first?
Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yes, and I can, I think the next part has some stuff that I can point you a little more in the right direction. It deals with the API. This is like the other stuff before you get to the API, but we'll get to that in a second. So again, with that example, easy way to send a link, or if you just want to copy and paste it onto your page and make it kind of appear as is. This is some work that I think it was this La Nacion also did. In 2013, they had a huge flood, and they had 51 people who had officially died. And strangely, they had a bunch of other people who died at the exact same time of not flood-related things. And what the newspaper did was they got all of these death certificates, and they mapped them based on all of these flooding zones, and were able to then get a judge to be like, no, 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 those deaths were related to this flood. And part of it was because the provincial government and the national government were accused of like really bad performance during this emergency. Like no government's ever been really bad during a major natural disaster recently, and lied about how many people died during it. It's the same sort of stuff. They were able to prove with data, like just because it says like heart attack. It's like, well, you died of a heart attack because the water went over your head and you couldn't breathe. That sort of stuff happens all the time. So this was a way for that. Then a judge was like, nope, these were real. You did bad. This is a great way of being able to take real data from reporting, putting it into something like this, and being able to get a little bit more context. This is one that the Telegraph did was, and this is kind of like a pretty standard story, how often incumbents win in these different elections. And so they're like, well, these are where they almost always win. So it's kind of like, what's the point? What seats are actually open? And they do this a lot in also American politics as well. It's like, which seats are almost always a lock? Which ones are more open to flip? Similar kind of deal that they've done. This was an interesting one where the San Francisco Chronicle took data for rental prices as well as Airbnb. Like, so where are the Airbnbs popping up, and then is rental prices going up? And if you can see this a little bit better, the areas where all the Airbnbs are, the average price of the rental as well as how expensive the neighborhood is becoming, they're both going up. So it's like Airbnbs are making neighborhoods more expensive because people are renting expensive properties, making less. Google Maps API. So to kind of get to your question a little bit more, the stuff I've shown you so far is kind of like I said, click, 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 copy, paste, shows up on your website. You get the design decisions that Google made. You can't really modify the look and feel as much. Like you can't change the fonts necessarily. A lot of that stuff is kind of locked in place. What also exists is this thing called the Google Maps API. And in case you don't know what an API is, it's just kind of like a way for computers to be able to talk to each other to pull out data. It's kind of like you can like, hey, Google Maps, give me all the data for downtown Chicago. And then Google Maps is like, here, do with it what you will. I don't know why it has an accent. But again, this is a way of being able to make it like more your style. And a lot of larger news organizations kind of have the resources to do this. This usually requires a developer, so somebody like me, to do a little bit more work. Like the New York Times, so to give your example, this map has the New York Times company's like styles. That is still Google Maps. But what they're allowed to do is they can override it. And so in your instance, you'd be able to put 1, 2, 3. And so they kind of did A, B, C, D. So they can kind of give you chronology of these points of interest that matter. Again, it looks like the New York Times, as opposed to if you're doing it with Google Maps, it would just kind of look like Google Maps. And I don't like to say, I don't think there's anything wrong with it looking like Google Maps, but the New York Times is very much the New York Times, and things must look like them. Similarly, WNYC kind of also has a maps style and a color scheme that they like. This was for the best places to watch the New York City Marathon. And similar thing, they asked people to tell them, what's the best place to watch the marathon? They mapped it along with their information, but they made it look like the WNYC colors and website and that sort of stuff. And then here's an example of the Berliner Morgenpost. It is an election map, and I took 2 years of German in college, and that means Berlin morning newspaper. But a very similar kind of map. And again, this is more their colors, their design scheme, but it's still Google Maps and still powered by Google.
When you scroll over though, doesn't it show the results of each precinct?
Yes.
I think I saw that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that requires API expertise.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm looking at the copyright requirement.
Yes. Google.
And then it's automatic.
But for something as simple as this person did this and then drove over here and did that, 1, 2.
Yeah.
Is that?
You can still possibly do that with the regular Google Maps. If you wanted to make it look very much like your organization, you would use the Google API to kind of hack it to make it a little bit more your style. You probably, I think there's ways to be like, make like a number 1 button, a number 2 button, a number 3 button.
Do you happen to know one of the video tutorials that covers that?
So that flight one is kind of like a point A to point B. Well, where it was point B was supposed to be. That's something that they show you how to do those kind of like lines and that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's definitely in there. Street View. This is a super nifty thing. I said nifty like 20 times already today. They have driven these little cars, and I saw one last weekend after I gave one of these talks, and that was weird. They have a big thing on top that takes a 360-degree photo, and they just drive them through cities. They've been on 7 continents, more than 50 countries, more than 5 million miles traveled. They also put them on bikes. They have people that take them, and they have these backpackers. So they do, especially in a lot of rural countries, they will have people walk through hiking trails to get the 360-degree areas of trails. I talked with an engineer once who worked for Brazil in solving horse routes, or how to get from point A to point B via horse. So it's like, oh, cool, you can get the bike directions in Chicago. It's like, well, they have horse in Brazil. So,
So you can look at the whole El Camino Santiago or whatever.
yeah. They have a lot of that stuff. So this is an example of some of the, they'll do stuff specifically. So the top left is Brazil's painted streets during the World Cup. That's at the top of the Burj Khalifa. That's the Galapagos Islands. And then this is what's El Capitan. They hired like 3 of the best climbers to climb up one of the regular trails and with those backpacks and take 360-degree photos. What's a really nifty feature is because they're driving through a lot of these places, they'll take a lot of the same photos in the same spot over time, especially if it's a bigger city. So in this instance, you get to see the Freedom Tower as it's being built over time. And my company's offices are right around the corner. You can do this in a lot of major metropolitan areas and some smaller metropolitan areas too. I know I gave this talk at Marquette University up in Milwaukee, and they had like some construction project that was going on, and they had enough photos to be able to see that construction project over time. So again, and this is just using like a tool where they would save each of those photos. And at the top left, when you go to any sort of like a street view place, if there's more, there will be like a slider where you can look at previous photos of that spot, which is pretty cool. Other news organizations that use this, like the Wall Street Journal, this is kind of a before and after Williamsburg in Brooklyn, which is like a hip person central. And they kind of showed how it changed over time. You can actually see the front of shops changing, cars changing, like the kind of cars go from kind of crappy to pretty nice. And so again, it's a way to be able to show how neighborhoods have changed over time.
And you could embed that as well?
Yeah, yep. And so what this is a simple slider tool, and there's, what's the one, Slider.js, like the Night News Lab built this very simple tool. You just give 2 images, and it knows what the slider left and right. But what they did was they got those 2 images from Google Street View. Similar for this, similar kind of slider tool. Like the before and after slider tool, if you Google how to build one, you will find a lot of simple, easy answers. But again, Washington Post, similar thing. Urban development through Google Street View. So you can see what this street corner looked like before, and here's what it looks like a couple years later. And as you can see, it's changing. We can also do, and I think this is one of the more niftier things, is you can publish your own 360-degree photos. There's an app you can download called Street View. and I will find it on my phone. What it allows you to do, as I will stand and show you, you can like take a photo, and it's like that, and it goes like, boop. I'm not going to do all of it because it takes forever. But what I can do is I can make like a 360-degree photo of this room, and then I can upload it to Google. And you have to give them permission to use it, but you can link to it. And then, so what you can do is, if like there's a big event happening, so if you have like a street festival or it's game day, it's homecoming or something like that, you can like stand where a big ass crowd is and like, here's what that experience was like. Yeah, and then you will look very silly. I did this in not Grand Central, to the Union Station. I took one of these in Union Station at like 6 a.m. And this guy was just like, "What are you doing?" I was just like, "I'm taking a photo, all 360 degrees." Like, "You can take a 360 photo?" Like, "Yes, you can, through Google News Lab Street View app." But what you can do is you can then upload this, link to it, and kind of show what that looks like.
How much time would you allow for that to work through Google's process?
Oh, you just have to upload it. It's pretty fast. So you have to upload it through, you have to be on a Wi-Fi network to upload it because it's a pretty big file. But then it goes pretty quick. There's other options available. So there are 360-degree cameras where you can create these like more live videos. New York Times has been doing, I think, like one a day, these 360-degree photo or videos. And again, you just can kind of like put one in the middle of a place. Someone can look at it and kind of be able to have a 360-degree live experience. New York Times had one recently with the writer R.L. Stine of Goosebumps and Fear Street. And it was like his apartment. And it was just like really weird because you're like, this is where this guy works. And he's like walking around and talking. But it's pretty nifty. That's the sort of stuff you can do. But again, this is so after you would upload it, your contributions, you would have your links, you can link directly to it. And you can also like move your image, be like, okay, that's what the sky looks like right there. You can then share that spot. What you can also do is, let's say there's a bunch of faces of people. Google has some algorithms to try to get rid of faces and like, make it so it's more anonymous and that sort of stuff. You can blur people out. Or if you are ever on Google Maps and you see something inappropriate, you can report a problem and let people know. And be like, there are people engaged in action or doing something, which has happened. Yep, you can. So yeah, you can with your own upload, you can blur it in the app. But you can also let Google know, hey, there's like people doing drugs, which sometimes they catch, and maybe you should blur that. Also, so here's an example of this new Vancouver restaurant. It's like, here's what it looked like inside of this restaurant on like its opening day. So again, it's a way of being able to do the ambiance of these locations that your audience may not be able to go to. You can also overlay audio with this thing called story spheres. Does anyone remember sound slides?
Yeah.
From a couple years back? Yeah. This is like sound slides, but with 360-degree photos, which is pretty nifty. So record audio, you layer it over. It's really simple to do. So it's a way you can make like this panoramic 360-degree photo and then also have audio over it. It's really easy to embed, just like everything else.
Do you use the app in your phone, or do you need that camera?
For which?
What you just showed?
Oh, no, that is like, there's a website that you would go to. So you would upload the photo and then you would put up your audio files on it.
Before we leave the street view to go to Breakout,
Yes.
Maybe this is a two-part question. We'll see. So Google is okay with or enthusiastic about journalists using Street View?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a good resource. If something happens, you can't leave where you are to go get a picture of
Exactly.
something happened. But if Google is enthusiastic about this, then maybe Google would be okay with building back in the ability to turn off the labeling.
Oh, well, so that kind of goes back to again, I'm not speaking for Google, I'm speaking for an SPJ member who has private opinions. My theory is it's just branding. It's like, you can use it, but you need our stuff on it. That's kind of their thing. And it's like, I know.
And just prop around it.
Yeah. And they get mad if they found out. But when do they get mad? Does that make sense? Like, how many times have they sent you a cease and desist letter? Never?
Never.
Yeah, but they'd probably be, I think, within their, I'm not a lawyer, that's a thing. Like, they don't care until they have a reason to care, if that makes sense. Again, I'm speaking for me and what I understand through the cloud. So, yeah, we can talk a little bit more about some of that stuff, but in the end, like, they're they're benevolent until they're not. But that's any organization that's giving you stuff for free. Does that make sense? So, they have every reason to want you to use this stuff because it makes them more noticeable. So maybe more people would be likely to use Street View or something like that because they stumbled across it. But journalists aren't the only people that use it. When I was a cops reporter, cops would take photos of the fronts of drug houses using Google Street View. Like, they would be like, "This is the house," and you're like, and it had all the shit. You're like, you just took a screenshot of your browser, and it's in a legal affidavit. Like, you couldn't get off your ass to take a photo, detective. And then you wonder sometimes why cops kick down the wrong door. Anywho, I have opinions. Google Earth Pro. This is a really nifty thing, which I've said 20 times. I'm going to kind of go through this one pretty quick. This one's a little bit geared more toward broadcasters and those of you that are making video for online. Google has they've either hired companies or rent time on all of these satellites going around the Earth at all hours of the day. And what they're doing is, so you get like those topographical maps, but part of that is also, they were hiring or using like the open source community that was like designing the actual buildings. They're making 3D versions of buildings in all these major cities. Problem was, you get 500 Eiffel Towers, but no one would do the apartment complex a block down the street. So Google hired airplanes and people to fly airplanes with 360-degree cameras to fly through major metro areas to get 360-degree images of major population centers. Which is why if you go to a lot of these places, on Google Maps, you can get more of a 3D view and be able to like turn and look around. It's pretty nifty. But on Google Earth, which is software that you would download and run on your computer, you can do like much cooler stuff. So this was, you can fly anywhere in the world and immediately have a visual for your story. So to kind of get back to your point, where we can't send news crews everywhere, or we can't have a helicopter when there's a hostage crisis halfway across the world. You can use Google Earth Pro to zoom into that location and at least give some sort of context around what that place looks like. So this was there's a hostage crisis. This is a gas facility in Algeria back in 2013. Now, nobody has like a helicopter ready to go in Algeria at a moment's notice. But they were able to use this data, overlay some of their own graphical stuff on top of it, and at least be able to give you some context about what's going on here. And now notice, they give credit, Google Earth, you at least say where you got the information from, but you can use it in not only broadcast as well as online as well. And they can give you a bunch of these files. What's really neat is when a lot of breaking news events occur, there is a newsletter list, which I will show you a link for, that they will send out like, hey, we have photos, like a satellite just went over where that earthquake happened in this part of the world. Here's the latest photos, imagery that we have. You can pop into Google Earth and make graphics or be able to see what it looked like before and after. So like this is an example of like, hey, here's like what the new satellite data looks like in white that you can like overlay over the old so you can kind of see before and after. So again, here's a before and after. This was like a Flight 17, an MH Flight 17. Here's what it looked like beforehand, and here's what it looked like after. So that way you can at least be able to compare what the crash site looked like based upon this sort of stuff. Because again, most news organizations do not own GIS satellites that are going over the Earth. But Google has some, or they rent time on some. Here's one, the Boston Globe did a before and after on some earthquakes in Nepal. Again, using this data in Google Earth. I built something like this years ago after some terrible tornadoes hit a bunch in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa. And I was able to show, here's what an F5 tornado going through downtown of a major city looks like, just what its destruction path was like before and after. This is historical imagery. So this is floods in Myanmar. And you can see before after. And so flooding is also, like, again, personal view. Climate change is real, and it's going to impact our coastal areas pretty regularly. Like if you look at a map of Louisiana from this sort of satellite view, it's not the same shape anymore because of how much of flooding has occurred, and it's just going to become more and more worse. But this is a great way of being able to get satellite imagery to show when that sort of stuff happens. So, you can also do fun stuff. This is the World Cup soccer stadium being built in Rio. And so this is just kind of like a time-lapse photo of what it looks like during that process. Ta-da! When the Catholic Church got a new pope, the Washington Post was able to make a map using Google Earth to show what the points of importance are in Vatican City. Google Earth also was used by Al Jazeera to show the world's biggest e-waste scrapyard in Ghana. Again, using satellite data, they're able to show where the scrapyard and all this other stuff is. You can export these HD movie videos. So if you've ever been watching the news and they have like this video where it's like, we now go live to Baghdad, and they do like a, they don't normally make that noise, but like they zoom in on a location 9 times out of a million, or no, excuse me, 9.99999 times out of a million, that was used by Google Earth. Because they give you, you can sign up for like basically a free software or a free broadcast license to use this stuff. And everyone uses more or less the same stuff. They just use different things to overlay over it, like After Effects or some of their other post-production stuff. So it looks more like NBC News' style or CNN styles. So again, there's a big Google Earth Pro tutorial at g.co/newslab that'll walk you through a lot of this stuff. There's 2 versions of Google Earth, Classic and Pro. I think the only reasons there's Classic is still around is because a lot of older news organizations still use it, so they don't want to like get rid of it out of hand. The newer one has a bunch of more high-resolution stuff. You can export HD movies. You can measure and draw stuff in it. And if you want to use it for free, GEP free. And like if you ever forget this, just Google Earth Pro free code. This will pop up. They want you to use this stuff. Here again, g.co/media Google Media Alerts. That's where you can sign up for that list, where they send out the email blast. And again, it doesn't come out that frequently. They are not spamming you all the time with new data. It's usually for really big stuff as well, and a lot of international stuff too, which is really great. Again, bit.ly/geomedialab has a lot more storytelling stuff relating to Google Maps. When it comes to attribution, always attribute Google and a data provider. So again, when I talked about Google sometimes has satellites or companies, or they rent time. So in this case, the one on the top left, that's Google. So you can just say map data 2016 Google. But this one down here, Digital Globe is like the subsidiary or the other company. So you'd say data from Digital Globe and Google or something like that. If you're working on TV, you can apply for a free broadcast license. Again, google.com/permissions talks a little bit more in depth about that. But they basically just like to know who uses their stuff. And I'm not sure about this, but I think sometimes larger chains can apply for a broadcast license for a lot of people. So you might already have one if you're working in a news organization that has a television place. I don't think you, if you are a newspaper or radio station, and you're putting your stuff up on the internet, you're not TV. You don't need a broadcast license. Jazz hands. Again, g.co/newslab takes you here. Here's some more of their resource information. And I'll go back to this. And this is where I tell you that SPJ is awesome. They are the reason that I'm giving this talk. SPJ, I'm hired for them. They kind of work with the Google News Lab. You can learn more about that partnership from spj.org/Google. So you can learn that I am not a complete and total corporate shill. If you would like to give me a rating, because Google likes to, this might shock you, they like data about stuff. You can go to tinyurl.com/spj2017. And that's where you would write your amazing review of Andy Boyle, who talked very slowly and gave a great talk, or just truthfully give me your how you felt about this talk. And there's my contact information as well. And then my very last slide where I say, great journalism is a thing of power. SPJ is awesome. Join, start a chapter, donate. They're pretty rad. So that is the end of this talk. And I have some time, I think, for questions.
Do they make money over this or charge you?
This who?
Google.
So Google, you can. So when we talk about the API, Google has limits for how much you can use it for free. And I can't remember. I think it's like 50. Again, I'm not sure if this is the correct number. It's like 30 or 50,000 page views or usage of the API a day, or you pay for a license. And when I worked at the Chicago Tribune, we paid for, well, the Tribune company, they paid for a license through Bing. So we used similar tools that Google has, except they were shittier because somebody else had already bought that license. I will talk smack about you, Bing, and your terrible geo search results. That somehow still got the job done. So sometimes places have partnerships where they pay for that. A lot of this is because they get information about who's looking at this stuff, which is part of their data collection. So, yeah. And also journalists. Well, part of it is they built all this stuff thinking that journalists would love this, and or communicators would love this, and then nobody used it. And they forgot the important part is you actually have to tell people how to use your stuff. You can't just be like, go forth and make. So that's kind of like why they started hiring people like me, or excuse me, partnering with SPJ to have people like me come in to do these sort of talks. So, yes?
For a lot of us, we're small.
Yeah.
Size to statewide organizations. We don't have the personnel. I don't have hours now.
Yes.
I don't master this stuff. So, what have you seen in terms of smaller news organizations? What do they do first? What do they find works best first of all before they start to scale up?
Some of the best things you can do are, I'm not sure if you might, this thing called Google My Maps, which is a very easy click, very simple to make maps. They're really good for if you have like any guides, like a statewide guide to some of the best tourist attractions, or like the best breweries in downtown Lincoln, Nebraska, or something like that. It's a great way of being able to map that information because that's something that somebody's more willing to search for and come back to repeatedly. So what I always like to say is if you were like a smaller organization, find those areas where you've already written the content or you already have existing resources in something that you can either continue adding to it or you can take the story that already exists and transform it into that sort of thing because then it's helpful for people. And then that way it's like the next time it's like, it's the 2017 Harvest Festival. Here is 2016's list of best harvest beers and their breweries, the information about each. So that way you can reuse that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like more like the evergreen content. That's usually really good. That's a great way to use these maps because again, it's very simple. It's like dot, what is it about this dot that's interesting? And then sometimes you just write in your CMS, like, hey, we made this map, here it is. And you can always link back to it over and over. And those are relatively easy to make compared to if anyone tried to make maps years ago, it's way harder. Google My Maps has made it a lot easier to be able to make that sort of stuff. So that's where I would start. So, cool. Anything else?
Well,
Awesome, thanks, yes.